Under the soft glow of a sleepy suburban morning, the air carried a hint of dew and possibility, punctuated by the rhythmic hum of traffic. Nathan Carter, 33, a dedicated emergency room doctor, drove home in his modest, slightly rusted sedan after a grueling overnight shift. His white coat hung neatly in the back seat, a symbol of his tireless commitment to saving lives. The road ahead was clear, and his mind wandered to the simplicity of a warm shower and much-needed rest. His reverie was broken by the sharp flash of red and blue lights in his rearview mirror, followed by the abrupt wail of a police siren. Nathan sighed deeply, pulling over with a reluctant but composed demeanor. It wasn't the first time he'd been stopped, though he hoped it would be uneventful. The officer who approached his window had the kind of swagger that spoke of unchecked authority. Officer Brian Tate was in his late 30s, with a burly frame and a smirk that seemed more rehearsed than genuine. His partner, Officer Kyle Jenkins, a lanky man with a constant smirk that teetered between amusement and condescension, circled around to the passenger side. "License and registration," Tate demanded brusquely, his voice carrying an edge that made it clear this wasn't a friendly interaction. Nathan handed over his documents, his expression calm but guarded. "Is there an issue, officer?" he asked, his tone measured. Tate glanced at the papers briefly, then shot a look at Nathan. "Your tail lights out," he replied, though his tone lacked conviction, as if fishing for an excuse. Before Nathan could respond, Jenkins chimed in from the other side, peering into the car. "So, Doc," he drawled, eyeing the white coat in the back seat, "big plans for the day? Or are you heading off to patch up some alleyway clients?" The insinuation was sharp, but Nathan remained stoic. "I just finished my shift at the hospital," he replied. Tate let out a low chuckle. "A doctor driving this?" he said, gesturing to the aging sedan as if it were a punchline. Jenkins leaned in closer, his grin widening. "Or maybe he's one of those doctors, you know. Prescriptions on the side." The laughter that followed was loud and deliberate, designed to draw attention. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. He'd faced this kind of treatment before, and he knew better than to escalate the situation. Still, the humiliation began to creep in as passers-by slowed down, their curious stares burning into him. When Tate abruptly ordered him to step out of the car, Nathan complied, moving deliberately and without resistance. "Just a routine check," Tate said with a smirk, but the way he roughly cuffed Nathan's hands behind his back and pushed him toward the curb made it clear this was anything but routine. The cuffs bit into his wrists as he sat on the cold concrete, his white coat now an awkward symbol of dignity turned into spectacle. A small crowd began to gather, phones raised to capture the unfolding scene. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tate announced loudly, waving toward the crowd, "meet your friendly neighborhood doc, making house calls on the sidewalk." Jenkins laughed, nudging Nathan with his boot. "Street Maryland, got a nice ring to it, huh?" The comment sparked uneasy chuckles from some in the crowd, but others began murmuring their disapproval. Nathan stayed silent, his gaze fixed ahead. He knew his silence carried more weight than any words he could muster. At the precinct, Nathan was led through a chaotic sea of desks and ringing phones to a cramped interrogation room with peeling paint and a single flickering light. Tate and Jenkins entered moments later, their bravado unchecked. Tate dragged a chair noisily across the floor, plopping down with an exaggerated sigh. "All right, Doc," he began, his tone dripping with mockery, "let's talk about that fancy coat of yours. Where'd you get it? Halloween store?" Jenkins leaned against the wall, his grin as irritating as ever. "Or maybe you're the kind of doc who prescribes meds in baggies, huh?" Nathan met their taunts with unwavering calm. "I'd like to speak to a lawyer," he said, his voice steady. Jenkins scoffed, but Tate leaned back in his chair, suddenly shifting gears. "Okay, let's see what the system says about you, Doc," he muttered, pulling a laptop onto the table. While Tate typed furiously, Jenkins circled the room, continuing his stream of jabs. Nathan tuned them out, his patience wearing thin but his resolve intact. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. Tate's fingers froze mid-typing, his expression hardening. He leaned closer to the screen, rereading the information before him. "Jimmy," he said, his tone no longer playful. Jenkins stopped pacing, his grin fading. "What's up?" he asked. "Step outside for a minute," Tate said curtly, his eyes still glued to the screen. "Seriously?" Jenkins asked, but Tate's glare silenced him. Jenkins left reluctantly, muttering under his breath. Alone in the room with Nathan, Tate turned the laptop around. On the screen were records, medical histories and photos of patients Nathan had treated. Tate's expression shifted from arrogance to something resembling guilt. "That's my mom," he said quietly. Nathan's expression didn't waver. "She had a heart procedure about 6 months ago," Nathan said calmly. "I was the attending physician." Tate's hands clenched into fists on the table as he processed the revelation. Moments later, Jenkins re-entered, still smirking. "What's the big deal?" he asked. Tate stood abruptly, his face pale. "Do you know what this guy did last night?" Tate snapped, pointing at Nathan. "He saved your dad's life in the ER." Jenkins froze, his smirk vanishing. "What?" he stammered, his voice unsteady. Tate turned the screen toward him, showing the records. Jenkins's face drained of color as he scanned the information. "I didn't know," he mumbled, his bravado crumbling. "I didn't realize." Nathan stood, his presence commanding despite the handcuffs. "Don't apologize to me," he said coolly. "Apologize to your parents. They deserve better." The officers stood in stunned silence as Nathan left the room, his white coat once again a badge of dignity. Outside, a crowd had gathered, their phones capturing the moment. Social media buzzed with outrage, clips of the incident spreading like wildfire. By the time Nathan walked out of the precinct, the narrative had shifted. The man they had tried to humiliate was now a symbol of resilience and integrity. Back in the interrogation room, Tate and Jenkins sat in silence, the weight of their actions finally sinking in. For Nathan, it was just another day where grace and dignity proved mightier than arrogance. As Nathan walked away from the precinct, the weight of the morning's events hung heavy on his shoulders, but his stride was steady. The crowd that had gathered outside parted as he approached, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, sympathy, and shame. Phones captured every detail, from the pristine white coat he carried draped over his arm to the calm, resolute expression that seemed to speak louder than any words he could have uttered. He climbed into his sedan, the once mundane vehicle now feeling like a symbol of resilience against humiliation. As he closed the door, a woman knocked gently on his window. She appeared to be in her mid-40s, her face etched with concern. "Doctor," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I just wanted to say thank you for what you do. What they did back there, it wasn't right." Nathan nodded, offering a faint smile before starting his car and driving away. The events of the morning replayed in his mind as he navigated the quiet streets of his neighborhood. Each comment, each sneer, and each smirk lingered, but so did the subtle shifts in the crowd's reaction, the growing discomfort and the murmurs of support that had begun to ripple through the bystanders. As he pulled into his driveway, Nathan exhaled deeply, the exhaustion from his shift compounded by the emotional toll of the morning. His modest home, with its peeling paint and neatly tended garden, felt like a sanctuary. He stepped inside, shedding his coat and placing it carefully on the back of a chair. His phone buzzed incessantly, notifications piling up as the incident gained traction online. He ignored it for now, craving a moment of peace. In the kitchen, Nathan brewed a cup of tea, the familiar ritual grounding him amidst the chaos. The steam rose in lazy spirals, and he stared into the cup, his thoughts swirling just as aimlessly. He thought about Travis and Jenkins, their smirks and their mockery. He thought about how quickly their arrogance had melted when confronted with the truth, a truth that had hit closer to home than they ever expected. The revelation that he had saved both their parents' lives wasn't a coincidence, he realized. It was a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of people, of how actions, no matter how small or significant, could ripple through lives in unexpected ways. The memory of their reactions lingered. Travis's pale face and clenched fists, Jimmy's stunned silence as he stared at the screen, they hadn't been prepared for the weight of their own prejudices to boomerang back at them. Nathan's instinct wasn't to gloat, though he'd be lying if he said he didn't feel a small flicker of vindication. What struck him most was the fragility of their bravado, how easily it had crumbled when faced with the undeniable truth of their reliance on someone they had belittled. It wasn't about proving them wrong, Nathan thought. It was about holding up a mirror and letting them see themselves as they were, flaws and all. Nathan's phone buzzed again, this time with a call. He glanced at the screen and saw his sister's name. Smiling faintly, he answered. "Hey, Mia," he said, his voice warm despite his fatigue. "I saw the video," she said without preamble, her tone a mix of concern and frustration. "Are you okay?" Nathan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm fine," he replied, though the weight of the day still pressed on him. "It's not the first time something like this has happened." "And that's exactly the problem," Mia shot back. "It shouldn't happen at all." Nathan nodded, though she couldn't see him. "I know," he said quietly. "But it did. And now, people are talking about it. Maybe that's something." They spoke for a while longer, Mia's fiery energy contrasting with Nathan's calm demeanor. She vented her anger at the officer's behavior, while Nathan reassured her that he wasn't letting it consume him. When they hung up, Nathan felt a renewed sense of resolve. He wasn't naive enough to think that one incident would change the system, but he also knew that change didn't come from silence. If his experience could spark a conversation, could make even one person reconsider their biases, then perhaps it wasn't in vain. The following days brought a whirlwind of attention. The video of the incident had gone viral, with hashtags like #JusticeForNathan and #DoctorsDeserveRespect trending across social media. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a stark example of systemic bias and the power of dignity in the face of adversity. Nathan's inbox flooded with messages of support, from strangers thanking him for his composure to colleagues sharing their own stories of prejudice. Among them were emails from activists and advocacy groups, urging him to speak out and use his platform to push for change. Nathan hesitated. He wasn't accustomed to being in the spotlight, preferring the quiet, steady work of saving lives. But as he read through the messages, he realized that this wasn't just about him. It was about the countless others who had faced similar humiliation, who didn't have the privilege of their professions or the chance for their stories to be heard. It was about the patients he served, the community he cared for, and the principles he believed in. A week later, Nathan stood on a small stage at a community event organized by a local advocacy group. The crowd was modest but attentive, their eyes fixed on him as he spoke. "What happened to me," he began, his voice steady, "wasn't unique. It was a symptom of something much larger, a system that allows prejudice to thrive, that normalizes disrespect, and that too often values power over humanity." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But it's also a reminder of the power of truth. The truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand firm. And when it does, it can dismantle even the strongest walls of ignorance." The applause that followed was heartfelt, and as Nathan stepped off the stage, he felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond personal vindication. He had turned his experience into a catalyst for dialogue, for reflection, and perhaps, for change. It wasn't the path he had chosen, but it was one he was willing to walk, guided by the same principles that had led him to medicine, compassion, integrity, and an unyielding belief in the value of every human life. Back at the hospital, Nathan returned to his routine, his colleagues greeting him with a mixture of admiration and pride. The incident hadn't just brought attention to his experience, it had sparked conversations within their walls about bias, respect, and the importance of standing together against injustice. Nathan continued his work with the same quiet confidence he'd always carried, his white coat now a symbol not just of his profession but of his resilience. In the quiet moments between patients, he reflected on how one ordinary morning had turned into an extraordinary lesson, not just for him, but for everyone who had witnessed it. And as he moved forward, he carried that lesson with him, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, dignity and grace could light the way. In the weeks following the community event, Nathan's life became a whirlwind of both praise and criticism. Support poured in from all corners of the city, and even beyond. Colleagues, patients, and strangers alike commended his calm and composed demeanor during an encounter that could have easily spiraled into chaos. Yet, as often happens when something garners public attention, there were also those who questioned his motives and integrity. Nathan found himself navigating a new, unanticipated layer of pressure. The sudden spotlight was unfamiliar, and though his intentions were never to garner attention, the incident had put him at the center of a broader conversation about dignity, bias, and systemic failures. He felt a weight of responsibility to ensure the discourse remained focused on the greater issue rather than becoming a spectacle centered around him. One afternoon, as Nathan finished up his rounds at the hospital, he received a call from the hospital's director, Dr. Elaine Carter. Known for her unshakable poise and decades of experience, Dr. Carter had become something of a mentor to Nathan since he joined the staff. "Nathan," she said warmly, "I'd like to have a word with you in my office when you have a moment." Nathan agreed, slightly apprehensive. As he entered her spacious, meticulously organized office, he was greeted by Dr. Carter's reassuring smile and a gesture to sit. "Nathan," she began, leaning forward with her hands clasped on the desk, "I want you to know that what you've done in the past weeks has resonated deeply, not just within the hospital but across the community. You've shown extraordinary resilience and grace under circumstances that would have unraveled many." Her tone shifted, becoming more serious. "However," she continued, "with this newfound visibility comes a responsibility. People are looking to you not just as a doctor, but as a symbol of change. It's important that you decide how you want to navigate this path. Are you ready to take this role on fully? Or would you prefer to let your actions speak quietly for themselves?" Nathan sat back, absorbing her words. He respected Dr. Carter immensely, and her perspective carried significant weight. "I never intended to become a symbol," he admitted. "I just wanted to do my job, to help people. But if sharing my experience can spark change, I'm willing to step up. I don't want this to overshadow the work I do here." Dr. Carter nodded thoughtfully. "That's a wise approach," she said. "But know that the two aren't mutually exclusive. Advocacy and medicine often go hand in hand. The very nature of our work is to heal and advocate for those who can't always speak for themselves. If you choose to embrace this role, you'll have a platform to address issues that extend beyond this hospital, issues that impact the very people we care for every day." Nathan left her office with a renewed sense of purpose. He understood that his role as a healer now extended beyond the confines of the hospital walls. The patients he treated were part of a broader community facing challenges that went far beyond physical ailments, and he had an opportunity, perhaps even a duty, to address them. As the days turned into weeks, Nathan began engaging with community organizations focused on equity and justice. He attended town hall meetings, spoke at events, and joined discussions about addressing systemic bias, not only in law enforcement but also in healthcare. His story became a touchstone for larger conversations, a way to illustrate the very real impacts of bias and prejudice on individuals and communities. He worked closely with a non-profit organization that aimed to provide resources and support for individuals who had experienced similar encounters with law enforcement, offering his voice to amplify theirs. One particular experience stayed with him. At an event organized by the non-profit, Nathan met a young man named Jordan. Just 18 years old, Jordan had been wrongfully detained by police earlier that year while walking home from his part-time job. The encounter had left him shaken and distrustful of authority figures. As Jordan shared his story, Nathan listened intently, offering words of encouragement and solidarity. "What you've been through doesn't define you," Nathan told him. "But how you move forward can. Don't let their actions dictate who you are or what you can achieve." The interaction left a profound impact on both of them. For Nathan, it was a reminder of the importance of visibility in advocacy. For Jordan, it was a glimmer of hope that he wasn't alone in his experience. At the same time, Nathan remained deeply committed to his medical practice. He knew that his primary responsibility was to his patients, and he worked tirelessly to ensure that the quality of his care never wavered. Balancing his growing role as an advocate with the demands of his profession was challenging, but it was a challenge he embraced wholeheartedly. He found solace in the small victories, saving a life, comforting a family, or mentoring a younger colleague. Each moment reminded him why he had chosen this path in the first place. The officers who had humiliated him, however, were not far from his mind. He had seen the guilt in Travis's eyes, the shame in Jimmy's demeanor as the weight of their actions became clear. Though he had no illusions about them suddenly becoming paragons of virtue, he hoped that their experience would serve as a catalyst for change within themselves and their department. To his surprise, a few weeks after the incident, he received a handwritten letter from Travis. The letter was brief but heartfelt, acknowledging the wrong done to Nathan and expressing a desire to learn and grow from the experience. It wasn't an apology for everything, but it was a step in the right direction. Nathan chose to see it as a sign that change, however small, was possible. Throughout this journey, Nathan relied on the support of his friends and family. His sister Mia, ever the firebrand, often acted as his sounding board, pushing him to stay true to his values while navigating the complexities of his newfound role. His parents, though proud, worried about the toll it might take on him. "You've always been a fighter," his father told him one evening. "Just make sure you're not fighting so hard for the world that you forget to take care of yourself." Nathan heeded their advice, carving out moments of rest and reflection amidst the chaos. He rediscovered his love for running, finding peace in the rhythmic pounding of his feet against the pavement. He journaled, capturing his thoughts and emotions in words, a habit that helped him process the whirlwind of experiences and responsibilities that had become his reality. As the months passed, Nathan's life settled into a new rhythm. He was no longer just Dr. Nathan Rivers, the dedicated physician. He had become an advocate, a voice for change, and a reminder of the resilience and dignity that could emerge even in the face of adversity. The journey had not been easy, and it was far from over, but Nathan faced it with the same quiet confidence that had carried him through his initial encounter. He knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he also knew that it was a path worth walking. For Nathan, the fight wasn't just about justice, it was about ensuring that everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances, was treated with the dignity and respect they deserved. And in that mission, he found a sense of purpose that was as profound as it was unshakable. As Nathan's journey unfolded, he began to understand that the true measure of his success wasn't the attention he garnered or the headlines he made but the lasting impact of his actions on those around him. Advocacy wasn't just about grand gestures or public speeches, it was about the small, meaningful changes that could ripple through a community. Whether it was mentoring Jordan, collaborating with local organizations, or inspiring his hospital colleagues to look beyond the walls of their practice, Nathan realized that change started with individuals daring to make a difference. He saw his role not as a savior but as a bridge, connecting people to resources, conversations, and opportunities that could empower them to fight for their own dignity and rights. One evening, as he prepared for another speaking engagement, Nathan paused to reflect on how far he had come. The memory of that initial encounter with the officers, once a source of pain and anger, had transformed into a catalyst for purpose. He thought about the countless others who faced similar injustices but didn't have the platform or support to fight back. It was for them, as much as for himself, that he continued to speak out. His story was a reminder that silence in the face of oppression only allowed it to persist and that courage, even in the smallest acts, could inspire profound change. The impact of Nathan's work became increasingly evident. At the hospital, colleagues began discussing ways to address bias in patient care, launching initiatives to improve equity and accessibility. Within the community, local leaders invited Nathan to participate in roundtable discussions about police reform and community building. Even at the precinct, there were whispers of change. Though progress was slow and often met with resistance, Nathan believed that each step forward, no matter how small, was a victory. His focus remained on fostering dialogue and understanding, knowing that the path to justice was rarely straightforward but always worth pursuing. Nathan's personal life also began to stabilize. He nurtured his relationships with friends and family, leaning on them for strength and perspective. He made time for the moments that grounded him, a quiet dinner with his parents, a morning run with his sister, or simply sitting alone with his thoughts, journaling about the day's challenges and victories. These moments reminded him that while his work was important, so was his well-being. To fight for others, he needed to remain strong himself. As he walked onto the stage that evening, the applause that greeted him felt less like validation and more like a shared acknowledgement of the work still to be done. Nathan stood tall, not as a hero but as a fellow traveler on the path toward a fairer, kinder world. In his closing words, he told the audience, "Justice isn't a destination, it's a journey. It's in the choices we make every day, the courage we show in standing up for what's right, and the love we extend to those who need it most. Together, we can create the change we wish to see, one step at a time." And as the room erupted in applause, Nathan felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, knowing that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The story of Nathan's journey resonates deeply with the challenges we all face in navigating a world that often feels overwhelming and unfair. Like Nathan, there are times in life when we are thrust into situations where our values and resilience are tested. Whether it's confronting workplace biases, dealing with personal struggles, or standing up against societal injustices, the courage to act is what defines us. In my life, I've encountered moments where I felt powerless against larger systems or found myself questioning whether one voice, my voice, could truly make a difference. But this story serves as a powerful reminder that even when the odds seem insurmountable, perseverance and integrity can lead to meaningful change. The first lesson I take from Nathan's story is the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. When confronted with moments of injustice or discomfort, it's natural to feel fear or doubt. However, true growth happens when we step beyond that fear, channeling our energy into constructive action. Whether it's advocating for ourselves, speaking out for others, or simply doing what we know is right, our small acts of bravery can set larger movements into motion. In my life, I've learned that keeping silent about issues that matter to me doesn't alleviate my discomfort, it amplifies it. The more I speak up, the more I find my voice, and the more I understand that others are willing to listen and join me in seeking solutions. The second takeaway is the value of resilience and self-care. Nathan didn't let the weight of his experience crush him. Instead, he used it to propel him forward. At the same time, he recognized the importance of taking moments to recharge, leaning on his support network, and reflecting on his purpose. This balance is crucial in my life as well. When faced with setbacks, it's easy to get discouraged or burned out, especially when progress feels slow or unappreciated. But by cultivating habits that nurture my mind and spirit, whether through prayer, reflection, or meaningful connections, I can maintain the energy to keep pushing forward. It's a reminder that strength isn't about ignoring your pain but about finding ways to heal and grow through it. Another vital lesson from Nathan's story is the significance of collaboration and community. Nathan understood that change doesn't happen in isolation, it's a collective effort. This resonates with me as I think about the importance of building relationships with others who share similar values and goals. Whether it's in my workplace, community, or personal life, I've seen how much more can be achieved when people come together, pooling their strengths and ideas. It's a call to action for me to seek out those connections, to lend my voice to causes that matter, and to be a source of support for others who might be struggling. Finally, Nathan's story inspires me to view setbacks not as failures but as opportunities for growth. It's a perspective I'm striving to adopt more fully in my own life. When I reflect on challenges I've faced, I see how they've shaped me into someone more compassionate, resilient, and purposeful. Whether it's a professional disappointment, a personal loss, or a moment of self-doubt, these experiences have taught me that setbacks often carry hidden blessings. They push us to reevaluate our priorities, strengthen our resolve, and sometimes even lead us to paths we never would have chosen but desperately needed. If I were to give advice to someone navigating their own struggles, it would be this: never underestimate the power of your voice and actions. Start small if you have to, but start somewhere. Surround yourself with people who uplift you and believe in the causes you care about. Remember that self-care isn't selfish, it's necessary for sustaining your fight. And most importantly, trust that even the smallest steps can lead to transformative change. Like Nathan, we all have the capacity to inspire, empower, and create ripples that extend far beyond our own lives. With faith, determination, and grace, we can turn even the darkest moments into opportunities to shine.